Which factor has the greatest effect on a community's stores of fresh water? Is it the location of the nearest ocean, the average annual rainfall, the location of the nearest mountain, or the average winter temperature? What do you think? The average annual rainfall. Yes, I would agree. Factors can have the greatest effect on the health of a river. The type of soil and salinity, the nitrate levels and turbidity, the human consumption and pH, or natural disasters and tidal changes. This is fertilizer. So what's fertilizer going to cause in a waterway? The green algae in the pond are like plants, so what are they going to do with the fertilizer? They're going to grow more or less? Right, so the fertilizer is going to cause an algal bloom. Okay, now, so the algal bloom, eventually the algae die, then what's going to happen?
It's just going to be in the water because there's nothing to help them grow.
Okay, so when things die, what do?
Decompose.
Decompose. In a room there. And the decomposition uses up what? Uses up dissolved oxygen. That means the fish are going to die. So those nitrates or fertilizer lead to an algal bloom. The algal bloom leads to the death of algae in plants, and then because eventually they run out of nutrients, they run out of fertilizer, and then they start decomposing. The decomposition uses up oxygen, and that's what really hurts the ecosystem. Turbidity is the cloudiness of the water. Which most likely describes the effect of removing shelter from an ecosystem while increasing the population? So we have less shelter and more organisms. Okay, so that one's out. Population will increase then decrease. Yeah, no, I don't think so. So I think the population would decrease, like you said, because of competition. And due to the lack of space and food, yeah. Because since there's less food, space and food, they're going to compete for it more. Okay. All right, let's look at number 37 here. Around areas of increased fertilizer, all of the heterotrophs within a lake food chain may show an increase in numbers. After the initial increase, the populations begin to decline. Which event most likely caused the populations to decline? So this is similar to that previous question about nitrates.
D.
Right, decomposing algae caused the decrease. Oops. Very good. Do you remember what's the name for this? We didn't have it in the notes, but we saw it in that video. Eutrophication. Our shrubs and plants grow better in areas, you had this one on a quiz, in areas where a canopy tree has fallen. So this is the canopy up here, and the canopy shades out the plants down here, so you just have small plants that don't need a lot of sunlight. But if a tree falls and opens up the canopy, what's going to happen? So, which most likely occurs in the area where the tree falls that helps the plants and shrubs grow taller? Is it a decrease in competition for sunlight, a decrease in the amount of rainfall, an increase in herbivore population, or an increase in soil fertility? So, yeah, tree, 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 open space, tree, tree, tree. We got the sun up here shining.
Only a shade of area is going to get sunlight. Only a shade of area is going to get sunlight.
Right.
The tree is blocking it, so it's gonna be.
So if you're a little plant and you live down here under this tree, then there's a lot of competition for sunlight. Because this big tree is getting all the sunlight and you get very little. But if you're a plant over here, you're like, woohoo, sunlight! Sunlight everywhere! So because that tree fell, there'd be a decrease in competition. You were right the first time. What happens to a population in competition when there is a reduction of living space? Bands in competition. So think about it this way. You've got this big living area, and you've got animals that live in it. I like to draw pictures and diagrams. I draw all over my test when I'm taking it. All right? Now, you've got all these animals living in this big forest. People come along and they build a mini mall over here, and they build another mall over here. So now you've got all these animals living in a much smaller space. So first question, are they going to compete more or less?
More, because there's not enough space, so it's.
Okay, so this sounds good. This sounds good. This is not. Why am I not marking? There we go. Competition weekends, and that is not.
I don't think it would be A, because the population wouldn't increase because it's going to decrease because of competition.
Right. So it had to be B, because the population is contracting to the smaller area. Very good. Plants grow by climbing and wrapping around trees. Trees covered by kudzu can die because they are starved of sunlight. What type of relationship is this between trees and kudzu growing on them?
I think it's D. D. Wait. Mutualism plus competition. What would be competition?
Mutualism is plus plus. Parasitism would be what?
Plus minus.
Right. Commensalism
Would be
is not a choice, but
0.
right, that's plus 0. Predator-prey is one thing eating another thing, and competition is two things trying to use the same resource.
C.
Right, it'd be parasitism. The kudzu benefits because it gets sunlight. The tree is dying, so it's definitely not benefiting. Which would most likely be the top predator in a food web? A seagull, seaweed, or a crab?
A.
Yep. Most likely you would have the seaweed,
At the bottom.
right? So it would be a producer. And then it's being eaten by the crab, and then the crab by the gull. Remember, arrows always point to the what?
What's above in the energy going to the chain?
Right, so the arrows show the flow of energy. Right. Relationships in a woodland ecosystem are shown below. So we have the sun, we have grass, a mouse, a hawk, a fish, and a pond. Which is a predator in this woodland ecosystem? The fish, the grass, the hawk, or the mouse? This woodland ecosystem, the fish is being eaten by the hawk, and the mouse is being eaten by the hawk. So the hawk is the predator. The mouse could be a predator if it eats like grasshoppers or something. The fish could be a predator if it eats smaller fish. But in this diagram,
He didn't say there was a
right here, the hawk is the best answer, right? An ecosystem sometimes lives, an organism sometimes lives on its host, benefiting itself while the host is harmed. How would you describe this relationship?
Parasitism.
Right. An example of a parasitic relationship. Hummingbird getting nectar from a flower, a lion chasing, killing, and eating an antelope, a tapeworm living inside a human's intestines, or an ant protecting an acacia tree while living in it.
It's not A because the flower is actually getting benefit too.
Okay, so what would that be?
mutualism.
Right. Okay.
And the second one, a lion chasing, killing, and eating an antelope is predator prey.
Right.
And the C is parasitism because it takes one to benefit.
So that's the answer. What about D? What would that be?
D would be commensalism. Wait, and protect and mutualism because they're both being affected.
Yeah, that it's worded a little weird.
Yeah.
But we know that the ants get food from the tree and the tree gets protection, so that should be mutualism. But it's definitely not parasitism. A, B, and D are definitely not parasitism, so C has to be the answer. Food chain shows the flow of energy through an ecosystem. What is the role of decomposers in this system? They recycle oxygen back to the ecosystem. They recycle energy from dead organisms back to the ecosystem. They absorb energy from sunlight to pass on to other organisms, or they obtain and use energy that remains in living organisms.
It's B.
There you go. See, you gotta watch.
Yeah.
Tricky questions.
15? No, wait. 10.
10%. Okay? So 10% is passed up. So if it was C, it would be 1, 0.1, 0.01, 0.001.
So 1,000 divided by 10 is 100, and 100 divided by 10.
Right. Because 10% of the grass's energy gets passed up, and then 10% of the mouse's energy gets passed up, and then 10% of the snake. And one of the consequences of this is that you're always going to have fewer hawks than you have snakes, and you're going to have fewer snakes than you do mice. All right. In which process is nitrogen from the air put into a form that plants can use? So remember, plants can't use the nitrogen in the air. Something has to be done to it. What is that? Nitrification is part of nitrogen fixation. And nitrogen fixation is taking nitrogen from the air. Okay, it goes to some lovely bacteria. It's a C. And they turn it into nitrates, and the plants can use the nitrates. So it would have been nitrogen fixation. The energy pyramid, the total energy available for consumption from one trophic level to the next is what? Is it reduced, conserved, multiplied, evenly distributed?
Evenly distributed.
Is it?
Wait, so in the pyramid, total energy.
So you got a pyramid. You have grass down here. You have a mouse. And then you have a snake. And then you have a hawk. How much energy of the grasses goes up to the mouse?
10%.
10%. How much goes up to the snake?
10%. 10%.
Right. So, if this was 1,000, this would be 100.
Yeah, it's reduced.
Right. New technologies have allowed automobile manufacturers to market fuel-efficient hybrid cars, but disposal of hybrid cars at the end of their service lives presents a problem. Which question represents a disposal problem unique to hybrid vehicles? So, side note, oops. Let's switch to blue, because I can. All right, hybrid vehicles, remember, usually have an electric motor that just runs off of batteries, and they have a gasoline motor.
It won't be.
It says disposal problem unique, and that's the kind of the key word there, unique to hybrid vehicles. Every car has a gas tank.
Yeah.
Every car has a radiator, and every car has at least one battery.
And gas tank isn't.
So this is not unique to hybrid vehicles. So that leaves us with A. While it would be done to recycle the battery. The batteries in electric cars could be lithium batteries. They may have lead in them. They may have mercury or cadmium in them. So they need special recycling procedures.